want to know about how I almost died and became an incomplete quadriplegic at the age of 27, so without further ado, let's get into it. What is up, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I know it has been a hot minute since I've made any new or relevant content for this page, but I'm back and I'm committing the rest of the year to actually putting out content on my YouTube page. Oh, I'm also sitting in my sunroom, so if there's background noise, I'm so sorry for that. I've tried to record this video probably 10 times. I was like dressed really nice, my hair and makeup is done nice. I mean, my makeup still is done, but I like tried so hard and I gave up. So now this is how we're doing it. This is what I normally look like, and I feel like I'm here to be authentic, and I'm not normally dressed up. I'm dressed in a big t-shirt, sweats, or cozy shorts. My hair's almost always in a bun or a ponytail or in braids, and my makeup is really done. So I don't know why I was trying so hard, because the people who are here don't care about that. They just want to hear about my life, and you are here because you want to know about how I almost died and became an incomplete quadriplegic at the age of 27. So without further ado, let's get into it. So a lot of my OG followers know that I had posted a video about this already early on. It was my very first YouTube video. I was sitting in my halo about three and a half months after the accident, and I made the video about what had happened, and I chose to take it down. I watched that video and I just like cried and cried, because that girl was given such different information and such a different outlook and what to expect than what really happened, and my outcome was not what they originally told me. And it's hard for me to hear that, because I see how hopeful, I say she, like it was the old version of me. I see how hopeful that person was, and yeah, I can't feel my legs right now, but don't worry, with enough physical therapy I'll be able to walk again, and all that stuff, and just didn't happen. And I thought it would be a better story if I told it through my recovered lens now, the aftermath of what really went on after and what really happened, how I recovered, and everything that came after that. And honestly, I just thought it was going to be better to tell this story now from my recovered lens, from the lens of the aftermath, really what happened. So let's talk about it. I think it's so important to start this story letting you guys know I was a nurse, and I love my job more than anything. I love that job more than anything, and I almost gave my life up for it. That's how dedicated I was to my job and my profession. And I was a new nurse. I was 2 weeks shy of working a full year and celebrating my first year working as a nurse. I was super excited for that anniversary. It was a huge milestone for me in just my life, and I never got to reach that. On August 16th, I was kicked in the stomach across the room by a patient that was in a state of delirium. And though that sounds dramatic, no, that's not how I was injured. Though in a kind of roundabout way, I guess it was. Because that night, already the doctor on call said, you should stay home tomorrow, like I'll even write you a note if you want it, and I'm like, I'll just wait and see. I put my shift up, and I called in saying that I was injured and wasn't able to come into work, and I went to sleep that night, or that day, and I woke up, and I guess Ryan saw how much I was struggling to get out of bed, and he was like, you can't go to work like that, like, you can't go to work like that. I'm like, I'm fine. Once I'm standing up, it's fine. It's just like the sitting and the standing that's, or sitting to like rolling over and standing that hurts. It felt more like sore muscles. I'm like, it'll be okay, because I saw that my shift hadn't yet been picked up, and you have to imagine that August 17th of 2020, COVID was just on like its first real bad peak where we live, and I already work at a hospital with no resources. So to find a night shift staff on a good day was hard, never mind during a pandemic. So I saw it, and it hadn't been picked up. I knew the ward was full, and I can go into work that day. I can do this. And so I did. I went to work, and my shift was relatively unremarkable. But I do remember laughing with my work colleagues before I left. And I think my brain holds on to that, because had I died on the road that day, that would have been their last memory of me, was just joy and laughter, and probably laughing at something dumb that I have done, probably at my expense, because if it can go wrong, or if it could happen, or if I could, embarrass myself, I normally do. That's the unfortunate, reality of being Brianna. And I just think on that all the time, and because of that, I tried to leave every scenario with a little bit of joy, or just on a good note, because you never know when the last memory of someone is going to be the last memory, and what their last memory of you will be. So I try to always make it a positive one now, and that's just a gentle reminder for everyone else watching this right now. Make sure that when you leave a room, you're remembered for being positive and joyful and kind, and you know, not angry and grumpy and things like that. So yeah, my brain stuck onto that, and I walked out the doors that day. I saw the sky. It was beautiful and clear, and it was August, and I live in Canada, so mid-August. It was already kind of cold in the morning, but that sun was so warm on my face, and I just knew it was going to warm up to be a nice day. And I remember vividly thinking, today is going to be a beautiful day, and I choke on those words. Now, the irony in that is just too much sometimes for me to handle, you know? So I was on my drive home, and I was approximately 10 to 15 minutes away from my house, and that's when chaos unfolded. A reckless driver thought he could speed across 4 lanes of highway traffic to get to the other side, and his calculations were wildly off, and I T-boned him going 100 kilometers an hour. And before all my state subscribers and followers are like, why were you going so fast? I live in Canada, so kilometers an hour is not the same as miles per hour. So I was driving the posted speed limit, and I hit him going that fast. And it was like a sledgehammer to my chest. And before I go any further, I'm just going to kind of glaze over this because I write in great detail in my blog. It's a new blog that I've started about everything that happened. Everything I remember, everything I felt and endured, it is in that blog. And it is way easier for me now to write about that than it is to talk about it. So I'm going to give you the brief version of this, but I really, you know, encourage you to go read it because it will give you a very clear story of why I have such severe PTSD, of why, you know, I am the way I am now, and I think it makes those injuries make a lot more sense and the gravity of them. But I T-boned him, and there's this moment after an accident where you're like, holy shit, I was just in a car accident. And I quickly ran my hand over my face and didn't see any blood. And I'm like, okay, no obvious head injury. I made sure I knew who I was, who Ryan was, my family was, and I was like, okay, I'm cognitive. There's probably not a head injury. It's not that bad. I went to reach for my door handle, except that my door handle wasn't where it was supposed to be. And you have to think shock happened like right away. And like, I just started to like panic because I thought my car was on fire because I'd never been in any sort of accident. So when airbags deploy, sometimes they like give off like this dust. So my car was dusty mixed with the smoke from the engine that was coming into the cab. Is it the cab of the car? Yeah, sure, the cab. It was filling up the cab of the car, and the heat I was feeling was also from the engine because my car crumpled the whole front end. So had the engine not crumpled under my car and a little bit into the dash, it would have came through and crushed me. So my dash crushed me, but the engine kind of stayed underneath and pushed it up, if that makes sense. But yeah, so I thought my car was on fire. I started panicking, like, holy shit, to get out of here like yesterday, so I'm frantic. I couldn't open my door. That's when I saw my left leg was shoved behind me. Again, gentle remember from a healthcare provider, I know better not to drive with my feet either crossed on my seat or up on the dash if I was riding passenger, because I have seen the horrors that can unfold from that. If you get into a car accident like that, you can shatter your legs and pelvis to the point of amputations, death. Like, do not drive with your feet up, because if an accident happens, even something as small as a rear end like that, if there's enough force to let the airbags go off, you can still break your legs like that, so don't do that. However, I was getting the worst post-night shift cramps, so I grabbed my leg, and I just kind of brought it up in a crisscross applesauce kind of position, and so when the dash came in, I guess my foot was out just enough where it was the driving force to propel my leg behind me. So when I saw that, I quickly grabbed my leg by my knee, was like in here, and I shoved it down, and I just needed more space, but I couldn't get the door open. It was stuck. And when I went to lean, I realized, like, I can't move much because the dash was crushing me into my seat, basically. And I had already knew I was in pain the moment of the accident, but it's when the full reality of that set in, it felt like I was being cut in half. I will never be able to describe that pain to people, and there's only been one other person that lives with a spinal cord injury that I know who shared their story with me, who expressed the severity of their pain in their back, and it matched to what I was saying. And I've never met someone who's had to endure that pain before and could feel it, and it was not comforting, but to know that somebody else at least knows what I'm talking about, maybe that is where I find the comfort in that. I'm not sure, but it was awful. It was the kind of pain that makes you, or lets you know that you're gonna die if you don't get out or don't get help. And I was just so panicked in the car. I threw my hands up in the air and I kind of just said, Papa, please don't let me die alone here. My papa was such an influential person in my family and one of the, biggest role models in my family, and a man we lost far too soon, and someone that obviously we consider a guardian angel now. So if he was my angel, he wasn't gonna let me die alone in there. And as I said that, as I said, Papa, please don't let me die alone in here, I heard hello. And to this day, and it is a hill I will die on, that first hello was my Papa's voice. And whether I was hallucinating it or not, that is who I heard. And when you first hear that, you're like, oh, I didn't mean like you to come get me, Papa. I didn't mean like you to come take me home. Not what I meant, but okay, I guess we're dying. And then I heard, hello, my name is John. And I felt these hands, these strong hands, pull me back into my seat. My seat was also cracked. The back was cracked. The force was enough to crack my seat. So you can imagine what it did to my lower spine. And he was trying to like stabilize me to what would have been the headrest. And he was just so calm and gentle. And I remember thinking, these large callous hands, like strong working man, this is my Papa's hands, I am hallucinating, I am dying. And then he just started talking to me, and you must know, I have a video about when I met John. John is a real person, he really is. He saved my life, he saved me, and why I'm here and able to talk and use my hands and, you know, be functional and not be on a ventilator, it's because of John. And I have a video on my YouTube of the first time I met him, and you guys get to meet him too. I also will be posting a video, he got to come to my wedding, and I got to share a very special moment with him that I will also post for you guys to see, or if you've already seen it on my other socials. It's a moment that will live with me for the rest of my life, and I will never not be thankful for John or my family, because he did save my life, and he stabilized my neck in that moment. And it's when he asked me, after we kind of ran through a list of possible injuries, Brianna, do you feel your legs? And I think that I was in so much shock and pain up to that point, I wasn't paying attention, that oh my god, like, I don't know where my legs really are. And that's when I realized that I was bleeding, because when I shoved my leg down, all of the crushed dash scraped through there and must have cut up my shin, and I didn't even notice or feel that. And then I realized how incredibly heavy they were. It feels like trying to move 10,000 pounds of dead weight. Like, I couldn't move them. I thought I was wiggling my toes, but I didn't know, so then now I'm panicked. And this entire time, I can't breathe. I was struggling so hard to breathe in that car. I think the not breathing was just as terrifying and painful as my shattered spine, because it's like this burning you get in your chest, this like deep burning of like wanting oxygen but not being able to have it. And I'm like trying to explain to him what I think my injuries were, and I always thought that I would be so much better in a crisis or a disaster situation, and that wasn't the case. I don't know if anyone could really be prepared for that, but I did in fact panic. I did in fact panic, because had I been more, you know, with it, I would have known to stay still. I would have known, you know, to wait for help, but I just wanted to get out because I felt my car was on fire. But that's when more panic set in. Again, already now I'm like struggling to even like and that's when John told them, it was the only time he raised his voice, was like, I need oxygen now. They passed John a blanket or something, they covered my face, I remember that. So when they shattered my window, it didn't get in my eyes and all over my face, and didn't cut up my face. But the glass was like powder, it was all over me. And that first breath of air was like, it was like water putting out the fire, and it still wasn't a full breath because I still couldn't catch my breath fully, but it was so refreshing, and I remember that. And I will never forget the EMS, when they finally decided that I was just becoming too unstable. They didn't have time to talk about how they were going to get me out of the car, they just had to do it. So they cut a piece of the frame and the door and were able to bend out what was left of it. And I guess when they saw me crunched in there and what I look like in there, they kind of just said, Brianna, there's no easy way to do this. We just have to pull you out now. So I remember feeling hands on my shoulder. I had already had a collar on, like a C-collar on, and they twisted me because they had to twist my shoulders to pull me out, obviously. I thought up until that moment I knew what torture and pain was, and I didn't till that moment, till they had to turn me. And my spine, and I'll explain my injuries after, but I had burst and crush fractures, so when they finally moved me, everything moved out. And when my spine finally had the ability to stretch out and all the broken bones finally gave way, my entire spinal cord started swelling. And when they pulled me out of the car after like that, like, oh, I'm dying here. Maybe I really did get cut in half, because why is that should not hurt that bad for a broken pelvis. And I just like, I'm gonna die. Like, I'm cut in half, I'm gonna die. And I remember looking up at the sky, and you have to imagine how loud it was out there. Like, there was so much commotion and so much, like, the ambulances, the sirens, the cops, the fire, like, the firefighters, the fire paramedics, like, everyone was there, and all the witnesses and people standing by watching it now. So it was so loud, and then it just was quiet. It was the most peaceful moment that I, well, had known up until that time, but in my life. It was the most peaceful thing I have ever experienced, and I knew I was dying. And I was so ready and welcoming, because before they were, like, pulling me out, I was, like, praying at that point. First I didn't want to die alone, but now I did. And you have to imagine the kind of pain it takes to just surrender to the hands of death. You have to know what that's like. And those are those near-death situations. When I talk to other people, they express the same things, and I feel like I'm not alone in that. And I think me expressing it helps other people knowing that they're not alone either. So yeah, it was just the most surreal thing. It was warm. I remember feeling this warmth, especially over my face and my, like, upper neck, because that was the place I had the full sensation. But I just remember it feeling like a hug, and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go to the loved ones in that big blue sky and just be done with this, torture now. I couldn't wait for it to end. Only I was woken up by a paramedic firmly sternal rubbing me and telling me, Brianna, you have to keep your eyes open, you have to stay awake. And I remember her, like, not screaming it in my face, but very loudly saying it in my face. Maybe it was yelling. I was yelling, it was. And they got me in the back of the ambulance, and once everything was starting, I remember, like, asking the questions, like, I'm a nurse, tell me what's going on, kind of thing. And to this day, and I am so sorry to all of the EMS that were there, because I know how lovely and amazing you were, but I did tell my family, like, EMS was being so rude because they weren't talking to me. I was asking all these questions, what my vitals were, what they were seeing, and nobody was answering me. Nobody was talking to me like a person. They were just working around me, and I know it's an emergency, but, like, no one was, like, answering me at all. And it wasn't until I read back my EMS reports from both the EMS and the STARS, right? So STARS is our air ambulance service here, that I was unresponsive for a lot of it. So the things that I thought I was saying out loud, I wasn't. Yet I was vividly aware of everything that was happening around me. And I would have thought I had, you know, passed out and imagined it, only the things they were saying or the things I knew were happening were in that report. So I knew what was happening. And it changed my perspective as a healthcare worker. If any healthcare workers are watching this right now, and you work in an ER especially, I have talked on this to other and ACLS courses and other healthcare providers, but I think it's so important to know, like, yes, it is our job to save a life, but that life is still a human being, and just because they look unresponsive, they probably are unresponsive, doesn't mean they're not still in there and they don't hear what's going on, they don't know what's going on. So there should always be someone that just reiterates that patient, if they know their name, say their name, and make sure they know that we are here, we're helping you right now, we're doing the best we can, help it, like, more help is coming if more help was needed, like, just stuff like that. And just talk to your patients like they're humans, because likely they know what's going on. And I think that that was a terrifying reality as a healthcare provider when I knew that, because I worked in an ER. So yes, gentle reminder again for all of my healthcare workers. But yeah, after that I got extricated. They said, the ground ambulance said, she's too unstable to be transferred by ground ambulance. STARS needs to land now. STARS is our air ambulance, helicopter service. And for, you know, context here, the closest hospital and ER was 5 minutes away. They didn't think I was stable enough to drive the 5 minutes for a doctor to clear me so STARS could pick me up there. And I think that's, like, what started to terrify me when I heard that. I'm like, STARS, I'm talking, I'm lucid, like, why do we need them? Obviously they're seeing something I'm not. Maybe that's just it. I'm cut in half. That's what's happening. And STARS picked me up. They were amazing, and I will always remember Jenny from STARS. She talked to me like a person. Besides, it was her and John. They talked to me like I was still in there, and she did the whole time. And there were times of lucidity, like I did actually vocalize at times, like I was in pain or I did become conscious, but in the reports it just said, like, unresponsive to painful stimuli, unresponsive to verbal cues, and all of the things, sluggish pupils. They were going through all of the things. But yeah, I got to the hospital, and again, this was during COVID, now during the height of COVID where I lived, so it was already chaotic in our hospitals, and I was not allowed anybody in there with me until they realized, like, okay, this is a critical situation now. So they let my partner come in, my boyfriend at the time come in, and make some decisions. And I'll never forget coming out of the CT scanner. I went in with just a few people, like I think it was maybe like a healthcare aide and a nurse, and I came out to a whole team of people waiting for me, and I'm just like, oh goodness. I knew then something was very wrong. And after Ryan came, they gave us the list of injuries, and at this point, when they had extricated me out of the car, I don't think I touched on this, but I lost feeling for my body. I couldn't like shrug my shoulders. My arms felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. And when I tried to move them, it felt like I was being shocked. Have you ever like used a TENS machine, like one of those muscle machines? It felt like that, but on steroids. It felt like my arms, my legs were being like electrocuted. Every time I had like the conscious thought to try to like move them, and everything felt so heavy, and I couldn't feel any of their light touches. Deep pressure was hard for my body to recognize. I could tell if my body was being moved around because I'm jiggling around, obviously, but I couldn't really feel what they were doing. It's a very terrifying feeling, and especially as a healthcare worker, knowing, especially what came next, that Brianna, you have broken your neck and you have a C2 complicated hangman fracture with bone fragmentation. Your entire spinal cord is swollen, and the swelling is pushing the bone fragments into your spinal cord. But at the time, they were very hopeful that they didn't see a complete cut in my cord, so they didn't think I suffered a spinal cord injury at that time. My paralysis at the time, they linked, or what they thought was from neurogenic shock from that swelling in my spinal cord. That is what they attributed that to, and then they started just going down again further the list of injuries, that I broke my back at T1. There was also in the reports, there's like the end plates of C3 were fractured, or the end part of my C3 vertebrae was fractured, and same with C1. Then I broke my T1, T4, T12, T11, or T11, T12, and then my lumbar spine L1, L2, L3, L4, and those are some of the worst ones. And the pain between that junction of like my lower T level spine to my L spine, that is where the worst of the breaks were, besides the neck obviously, because they were compression fractures with burst fractures. So there was so much force, it crushed my spine down on itself, that it crushed those vertebrae, but there was nowhere for them to move now, so they burst out. So that sucked. And so when they removed me, that's where all that pain was, and what the clicking was that I felt, which is gross if you think about it. I don't like it now. And I broke my sacral spine, broke ribs, had a partially collapsed lung. I dissected an artery in my neck. I broke bones in my inner ear, broke a bone in my mandible, and from the head injury, it gave convergence palsy, so my eyes don't always come into focus now. Oh, I have a little goldfinch that comes to visit me, and I think he's good luck, so he's visiting us in our story today. So hello, Mr. Goldfinch. I actually attribute them to my papa, so it's kind of funny that I'm talking about this, and that bird came here now. But I digress. So yeah, it was critical, and because I was in a pain crisis now, none of the pain medication was working. My blood pressure was soaring through the roof. They were trying to control it so it wasn't putting, you know, any more strain on that artery. They were trying desperately to avoid a stroke, and they were, to this day, they still don't know how I didn't manage to stroke out there, and so, again, blessed, thank you. So yeah, it was critical, and they decided that I wouldn't be able to be stable enough for surgery, so they decided to go ahead with a halo. A halo is a device, it looks medieval. It is screwed into your head in 4 points. It is screwed actually to the first millimeters of your skull, the first few millimeters. So anyone who says it's not screwed into your skull, that's lying. Google this for free. It is definitely screwed into your skull. I get on that debate a lot. And it sat on these 4 poles that were attached to an external vent, and I wore that permanently for 4.5 months. Think of it like a cast. It did not come off. And because now none of the pain medication was working, when they put the lidocaine in to freeze my head, it didn't work. And my head now is hypersensitive because it's the only thing with full feeling. So I remember even if they were like touching my hair, it felt like bugs crawling under my skin because everything was so hypersensitive. So when they started to screw with their hand crank screws into my head, I started screaming because I felt it. Kept telling me, it's not frozen, it's not frozen. Like, we put like double the amount in there kind of thing. And the last thing I heard over my own screams was Ryan screaming. It's the only time he raised his voice in all this was, put her out, what are you doing? Put her out, put her out, put her out. And so they sedated me at that point. And yeah, that is the starting point of my journey and how I became here. Now, when it comes to the prognosis at the time, they thought that I would make a near full recovery, that they didn't see a spinal cord injury at the time, or didn't acknowledge all the bone fragments being pushed into my spinal cord and the damage that they could cause. They also ambulated me very early, or tried to ambulate me early after the accident. Ambulation is actually really good post-surgery. People who are injured, if the injury can sustain, you know, mobilization and walking, it helps heal those bones. It's like good for blood flow, avoids blood clots. It's really good for that if they're stable enough to do it. And unfortunately, because they didn't realize the severity of my injuries, it probably shouldn't have happened. And the real problems really came after my halo came off, because the moment they did, like, everything was like fuzzy and I felt like I was gonna pass out. I also have a video on my social media of them taking off my halo, so if you like gross things, go check that out. It is on my TikTok. One of the pinned videos. Or maybe I even have it on here, I don't remember, so sorry. But I remember that, and they were like, oh, that's normal, that's fine. But I was getting these like tingles down my arms, and they were like kind of heavy again. They're like, that's just like your body readjusting, blah blah blah. And we're like, okay, again, doctors know best, you just believe it. And I didn't want to be that person that, like, nurses make the worst patients, so I never questioned any of them. And honestly, after your own trauma, when you're on so much medication you can barely function, it's not up to you to be your own advocate and to make, you know, the right calls. There were two physical therapists there that fought and fought and fought for me and, like, said, like, something isn't right here. Still got transferred out. So when my halo came off, my neck wasn't fully healed. They had to, because these sites kept getting infected, so they decided to take the halo off and just do conservative management in a C-spine collar, and I had to stay on permanently for the rest of the next 2 months. So I was completely mobilized for, I think, 6 months without being able to move my neck. But the first collar didn't fit correctly, so there was external movement in my neck. And when we got home, like, it was a day later when I'm just like, something isn't right. Like, my arms feel like so heavy. Everything feels weak. I'm getting like these bugs, like, it feels like bugs crawling under my skin. And we went back, and again, I was just told, like, that we see a small amount of swelling, but probably not enough, and there's no spinal cord injury that we see, and blah, blah, blah. You know, that's just normal, but nothing ever was normal after that. I never regained full function of my bowel and bladder. I never regained function in both of my legs. I have partial function in one of my legs, and my arms just stayed kind of heavy and weak. I've got great movement of my arms, and I'm very blessed that I've got great function of my hands. It is just like, and I can move that finger. They're just, the further you go down, these fingers are just like the weakest, so that I don't always engage them, and so then I get a little bit of a contracture in this one, and I have a hand splint to stretch her out. So people are often confused about, how are you quadriplegic if you can move all of your limbs? Well, can't move all of them, and quadriplegia just means that all 4 major limbs are affected. Doesn't mean that they're fully paralyzed. That is not what being a quadriplegic means. That's not even what paralysis means. You can have partial paralysis. That best describes me, because I'm an incomplete spinal cord injury. So at the time, they already knew that my thecal sac was ruptured. Your thecal sac is a very, very fine, you know, tubing that surrounds your spinal cord. So that was ruptured from one of the bone fragments. And it was found out much later that I have a compression style spinal cord injury. All that swelling damaged my spinal cord, and the repeated movements before my body was ready, the repeated swelling on my spinal cord constantly ultimately caused the spinal cord injury. Well, the car accident did. The car accident caused spinal cord injury, but, you know, life after that continued on, and that's why I am the way that I am now. And I think that sometimes it's a tough pill to swallow. Again, watching back that original video about, like, I'm gonna, you know, put in all of this work and do everything I can, and I will be able to walk again, go back to my life and my job, and that never happened for me. I still do not work. I've not been yet cleared, no matter how often I fight for that, and I'm hoping for it soon. And I'm in a wheelchair. I am wheelchair bound and will be probably for the rest of my life, unless spinal cord injury therapy has come a long way in that time. I got married. Ryan proposed to me in the hospital. Again, story for another time. And I write about, and will continue writing about all that in my blog. Again, please go leave my blog read, because if you read my blog, you will understand exactly what I went through. And again, do not go read that if you've been in your own car accident. Things like that are like triggering, and the trauma is too much. I talk a lot about the trauma I endured too, so if that's too much for you, I don't suggest you read it. But if you really want to know what I had to endure, go give that a read. I'd also appreciate any feedback, because this is my first time writing. The feedback so far has been really great, and honestly, I will see where that goes, and I am here now to continue making content and continue on living my life. My next big goals obviously are a return to work at some capacity, and maybe nursing was supposed to be a season in my life, and maybe there are other things out there for me, and I'm working toward that as well. And recovery never stopped for me. I still continue with my physical therapy, still continue on with obviously mental, cognitive, and driving therapy. I still have yet returned to driving a vehicle. And a lot of you are going to ask what happened to the man that caused the accident. I also have a video on that, and that is a video that you should probably watch next after this. It is the sentencing of the man that almost killed me, or the lack thereof. So I would go give that video a watch as well. So thank you guys for hanging out. That is kind of the gist of my story in the fastest way I could think to talk about. So thank you for sticking here with me and for following me along. If you have any questions that are probably answered in the blog or in some of my other videos, but if I haven't answered anything yet and there's stuff you guys want to see, let me know in the comments. I'm an open book generally. I talk freely and openly about this because I believe in sharing my story. It can help somebody else out, and over the last few years the response to it has been enormous and beautiful, and it actually has helped a lot of people, and for that I am so grateful for, and it's very humbling to know that. So thank you guys for being here, thank you for listening to my story, and stay tuned for my next video.